Papyrology seminar. It's a great honor to have you, Professor Biatale, and everyone to the Arabic Papyrology seminar. Today marks the 13th session of the seminar, and it is indeed a very special occasion because we have a very special guest, Laura Aguer. And I'm very pleased to welcome her to the Arabic Papyrology seminar. Laura has been a scientific member at the FOO since 2023 and a papyrologist with the French Archaeological Mission in the Eastern Desert. She edited the Greek Ostraca from the Ptolemaic site of Bir Samut as part of her doctoral thesis, which was successfully defended in 2022 under the supervision of Hélène Coveney. Currently, she is working on the Ostraca from Ghozza, a mining village in the Eastern Desert, and she is developing a broader project on the mines. Her work provides invaluable insights into the economic, social, and administrative history of Egypt's desert regions. Today, she will be presenting on a very interesting topic to us as Arabists, and that's why we have here in the Arabic Papyrology seminar, the Arabs in the Ptolemaic Ostraca from the Eastern Desert, shedding light on the interactions and presence of Arab populations in the region through the lens of documentary sources, mainly Greek Ostraca. Please join me to welcome Laura. Laura, we are all ears and we are all eager to listen to your talk. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope it works. Okay. Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to warmly thank Professor Khaled Younes for inviting me to give this presentation as part of his seminar on Arabic papyrology. I am sure that our discussions will be fruitful. In fact, I am presenting this paper with humility because this subject raises questions about Arabic onomastics, in which I am not at all a specialist. So I welcome any comments you may have, and I should also point out that most of the documents you are about to see are not yet published. I would therefore ask you not to share or reproduce what is presented in this seminar. Thank you. So today we are going to look at some older documents than those you are used to see in this seminar. However, these texts are proof that the link between Egyptian power and Arab communities existed much earlier than we usually imagine. As Khaled said, I am a papyrologist specializing in documents written in Greek. More specifically, since my PhD thesis, I have been working on the Ostraca discovered by the French Archaeological Mission in the Eastern Desert, the MAVDO. I am therefore very lucky to be able to work on documents that can be linked to the context in which they were discovered. This gives us a lot of additional information about the archaeological and environmental context, which we take into account when editing the texts. More precisely, my research focuses on two sites, Bir Samut and Ghozza, which I'll start by introducing to you. So I'm sorry, I say Ghozza and not Rosa, as I should do. First, Bir Samut. Bir Samut was excavated by the MAVDO between 2014 and 2016, under the direction of the historian and archaeologist Bérengère Redon. The site is located on the road that linked the city of Edfu to the port of Berenike in the early Ptolemaic period, during the second half of the 3rd century BC. The peak of the activity of the site is under the reign of Ptolemy III. This road was used by elephant hunters sent by the king to capture war elephants in the Horn of Africa. The elephants were taken by boat to Berenike, then transported across the desert to Edfu. And after that, the elephants were taken to Memphis and then probably to Alexandria. Bir Samut was one of the big stations, statmos in Greek, along this road, providing supplies, that is to say water, barley, wheat, etc., for the caravans. and these caravans were mainly composed of hunters and soldiers. Bir Samut also provided the smaller stations of the road, which, unlike Bir Samut, had no wells. These smaller stations were very important because the big stations like Bir Samut were not enough to provide the caravans. The stops needed to be shorter than the path between two big stations. So the little ones were very important for the caravans. Bir Samut yielded a large number of Greek ostraca, several hundreds, more than 400 in fact, mostly found in the dams of the station. Those Greek ostraca are published by myself, and the site yielded also numerous ostraca in demotic, published by Marie-Pierre Chauffret. This documentation consists mainly of accounts and letters testifying to the role of the station in the supply system of the road. Today, the site was totally destroyed by the gold miners currently working in the desert. So the beautiful pictures of Bir Samut that you can see on the left of the screen, it doesn't exist anymore. It's totally destroyed. The second site I am going to talk about is Ghozza. The ancient name of this site is Berkou. It's an Egyptian name, and we don't understand completely the origin, but Berkou is a reed in the Roman texts of the site from the fort. Ghozza is situated further north than Bir Samut in the eastern desert, between Kena and Safaga. Nevertheless, the two sites are contemporary. Ghozza was not a road station, but a village occupied by the miners who exploited the gold mines of this area in the second half of the 3rd century BC. In the photo, you can see the village in the background and the Roman fort in the foreground. The Roman fort served as a station on the road to the porphyrites quarries during the Roman times. And in the back of the photo, you can see the well of the Ptolemaic village. Maybe I can show you. Here it's the well, here it's the village, and here it's the Roman fort. The site has been excavated by the MAVDO under the direction of Thomas Fauché and then Maël Crépy since 2020, and has also yielded several hundred ostraca. We have already more than 700 Greek ostraca from Ghozza. Most of these documents are accounts which recorded the quantity of ore crushed each day by the workers. Such documentation on the exploitation of mines is unique and extremely valuable. The text contains a rich technical vocabulary, such as the names of the tools, which can be linked to other archaeological discoveries made in the field. The activity of this site, and consequently the documentation, are therefore completely different from Bir Samut, as we will see. However, and despite this difference, these two sites do have some elements in common, starting with the individuals who made up the societies that occupied them. Indeed, the occupants of Ghozza and Bir Samut composed multi-ethnic societies, as it is shown by the names I read in the text. This is not surprising in a marginal environment such as the Eastern Desert. These societies were, of course, made up of Greek and Egyptians, but also Jews, Thracians, and desert dwellers. These desert peoples are represented on the one hand by the Troglodytes. It's an African nomad tribe who was present at Bir Samut, and on the other hand by the Arabs, who are the focus of our attention today. Before tackling the question of the Arabs of Bir Samut and Ghozza, I would like to say a few words about Arabs in the Ptolemaic documentation in general. They appear in the text from as early as the 3rd century BC, and the subject has already been dealt with by various researchers, So here I show you a short bibliography. It's not complete at all, but the key paper on this subject is by Sylvie Honigman in 2002. To work on the Arabic names, I also use the work of those who have studied Greek transcriptions of Arabic anthroponyms, like Maurice Sartre on inscriptions from Bostra, Jean-Baptiste Yon on Palmyra, and Andreas Kaploni on Petra and Nessana. But we will go back after on the problem of the transcriptions. Arabs can be identified in two ways in the documents in Greek, by onomastics or by the use of the ethnic Arabs in Greek. The primary meaning of the word Arabs is not an ethnic origin, but a way of life linked to the desert, which is nomadism. The word Arabia is also very vague in the Greek of Egypt, as it refers to everything situated to the east of the Nile. So, in the primary sense, an Arab, in the Greek documentation from Egypt, is therefore a Bedouin. The documentation shows a continuous migration of nomadic pastoral tribes, some but not all Arabic-speaking, from the Near East to the Red Sea coast, to which the Greeks associate a number of characteristic elements such as the tent, the small herd, a bow, and the camel. Anyone who met these criteria, the camel, the tent, the bow, etc., could be called an Arab, even if they didn't speak Arabic. In other words, the use of this ethnic does not necessarily mean that the person bearing it was really an Arab of Arab origin, as we understand it today. He was first and foremost a nomad, a Bedouin. The use of the ethnic can therefore be misleading, and we need to know the name, the anthroponym of the individual, to be sure if he was really an Arab, as we understand it today. I know this point is a little bit difficult, but you can forget what I just said, because we are sure in the documents from Bir Samut and Ghozza that we have real Arabs, if I can say this. In Upper Egypt, where Arabic names abound in the documentation, the ethnic Arabs designates merchants from the Arabian Peninsula. They left numerous graffiti along the caravan roads between the Red Sea and the valley. In the Ostraca from the Eastern Desert, Ghozza and Bir Samut, we are indeed dealing with nomads from the Arabian Peninsula, as shown by the onomastics, as we will see. But the Arabs from Bir Samut and Ghozza don't seem to have been merchants, as in the rest of Upper Egypt. Let's take a closer look at the evidence, starting with the Ostraca from Bir Samut. In the text from Bir Samut, the Arabs appear mainly in accounts and lists. Several documents indicate that the Greek power employed them as camel specialists. In fact, as we have seen, Bir Samut was a site which has an important role in the supply system of the stations of the road. This site was supplied by Bir Samut thanks to camel caravans. We know from the text that camels were used to transport water and grain, as well as wood and mail, letters and, more precisely, official letters. The Arabs were invaluable for their knowledge of the desert and these animals, which were essential to ensure the success of this system. This was not the first time that the Ptolemies employed the Arabs and their camels. During the War of the Diadoques, the general fighting for Alexander's empire, Ptolemy I sent troops to Seleucus in Babylon to fight Antigonus. The soldiers traveled on camels, probably supplied by the Arabs, as it is recalled by Arrien. This function, camel driver, also appears in Ptolemaic papyri outside the Eastern Desert, especially in the Zenon archive. Zenon was an employee of Apollonios the Dioiketes, an important advisor to Ptolemy II, who was in charge of the treasury and overseeing significant parcels of land. In this letter to Zenon, a man who refers to himself as Barbaros in Greek, that is to say, someone who doesn't speak Greek, complains of mistreatment while he was in Syria caring for camels. Given his profession, camel driver, the mention of Syria and the term Barbaros, this man is probably an Arab rather than an Egyptian. But sadly, as you can see at the beginning of the text, the name is totally lost. Bir Samut provided several lists of camel drivers. These lists mention very high numbers of camels. One of them registers a total of 114 camels. It's the highest number in the Ptolemaic documentation. We will look at two examples of these lists. The first one is OSAM 504. It's a list with several names of camel drivers, as we can see with the abbreviations for camel. It's the kappa with an alpha above. You have one here, for example, the kappa with alpha for cameloi, camel. So several names of camel drivers, including 4 Arabic names here put in red. Some have been transcribed into Greek so that they can be declined. They bear the first declension ending, for example, saoidos, the ending with os to be, it's a possibility, thanks to this ending, to decline the name in Greek. The last name of this list is unknown. It's Salanis, Salbanis or Saldanis, maybe. The reading is totally uncertain. It's the name here. Maybe, yeah, Salbanis. So maybe it's an Arabic name because it's unknown to me. So if you have a suggestion for this one, I would be happy. The second list I want to show you is 592. It's exactly the same type of list, but not by the same hand, with 2 other Arabic names, Ziyados and Obaidos. And we can see that the total of this name, it's a total number of camels, 104 camels, who transported 26 artabas of barley. These names are undoubtedly Arabic anthroponyms. As I said earlier, I am not a specialist in Arabic onomastics. I have therefore called on colleagues, such as Jean-Baptiste Yon and Ahmad Al-Jalad, who have given me their opinion on these names, but please do not hesitate to share your comments and on the transcriptions too, if you have any at the end of the presentation. So, among those list of names, we have Omrous. It's written Emrous in another text that we will look later. And with this name, we can see a vowel hesitation on the first syllable because Omrous is also written Emrous in another text. But with this name, we can recognize the Arabic name Amrou, which is frequent in ancient Arabic. There is also Adzarios, which, according to Sylvie Honigman, presents an Arabic linguistic pattern. So I put it on this list of Arabic names. Saoidos, which is a transcription of the name Said. Zobeidos, it's the anthroponym Zubaid, built on the root which means butter, cream. We have also Ziyados, Ziyad, abundance. And the last one, Obaidos, Obaid, the diminutive for servant. If the link between Arabs and camels is already very clear from these 2 lists, it is confirmed by a letter published by Hélène Cuvigny in 2020 in a book edited by Hélène and Damien Agut. In this letter, we find Omrous, here spelled Emrus, it's the text I talked about, with an epsilon and only one mu, not like in the text, in the list we saw before. Emrus, in this text, in this letter, is said to be an Arab from the desert. And I'll come back to this expression later. Emrus is responsible for taking the camels to pasture so that they can reproduce. In the desert, the pasture probably means the vegetation of the wadi, particularly the acacia. In fact, the eastern desert is not totally, we can't find some vegetation and even big trees, because we saw even today very big acacias in some part of the desert, especially in the wadi, thanks to the flash flood, which happens sometimes. So I read the transcription. Hermophilos to Thios greetings. Send us the skin and entrust it to Abdos, the agent of Kalidemos. So Abdos, it's a pan-Semitic name, in fact. So it's not necessarily an Arabic name. Here, according to the context, Abdos is probably another Arab in charge of a skin, and probably the skin of a camel. But when you have only Abdos in a text, it's not necessarily an Arabic name when it's alone. Then order Emrus, the Arab of the desert, Emruti to Oreino Arabi in Greek, and his sons to take the females to pasture so that they can breed. Tell them that if they don't, they will pay me for the young they have to give birth to. This letter supports the hypothesis that camel breeding was introduced to Egypt by the Arabs during the first millennium BC. It is also reminiscent of sales contracts from the Roman period that mention marks in Arabic characters, in Greek arabikois karagmasi, on the camel's thicks, confirming that groups originating from the Arabian Peninsula played an important role in camel breeding in Egypt. In this text, it also appears that the Egyptians, here a man named Thios, were intermediaries between the Greeks and the Arabs. The letter shows that it was the Greeks who supervised the camel drivers. The author of the text of the letter is a man called Hermophilos. We will meet him again in another text. The Ostraca from Bir Samut also show how the camel drivers were organized. The text revealed the existence of the function of chief of the royal camel drivers through the use of the expression O deina ton diatudeinos basilikon cameliton. Someone from the corps of royal camel drivers commanded by someone. This expression is borrowed from the military language. It literally means those who have been recruited through the intermediary of someone. I haven't found any parallel for this use of the adjective royal, but I assume it has something to do with the fact that the king had a monopoly on the desert activity. The camels were therefore those of the king, even if they were bred by Arabs. The chiefs of the royal camel drivers almost all had Greek names. The camel drivers were themselves divided into groups commanded by a dekatarchos, literally chief of 10 individuals. Those dekatarchoi bore an Egyptian or an Arabic name. And the dekatarchoi may have acted as intermediaries between the Greeks and the Arab camel drivers. This hierarchy is not unknown to the Arabs. In this papyrus, it's contemporary with Bir Samut, Arabs from Philadelphia, a city in the Fayum, are represented by dekatarchai in a matter concerning their salaries. So I just put the translation of the beginning because the rest is not interesting for us today. But these Decatarchi bear a Greek name, Demetrios, and an Egyptian name, Petekon. According to Sylvie Honigman, these men with Greek names adopted Greek and Egyptian names as a result of their long presence in Egypt. That's why we have men with Greek and Egyptian names with the ethnic Arabs. But let's go back to Bir Samut. Here is an example of the text that reveals how this hierarchy worked. This is an entole, an order for supplies for a caravan, which was addressed to all the chiefs of the stations. Those chiefs were called keiristai, it means managers. So all the stations on the road between Edfu and Berenike, along which the caravan was traveling. Here it is Aiaidos, an Arab, Decatarchos under the orders of Hermophilos, chief of the royal camel drivers, who receives supplies for his 5 camels on his way to the valley. There is a good chance that this Hermophilos, chief of the royal camel drivers, is the same as the author of the letter we just saw about camel skin and camel breeding. I have also indicated here Kaploni's analysis of the name Aiaidos and his different hypotheses. So it's sure that it's an Arabic name, but the route on which it is built is not sure. So here it's the ideas from Andreas Kaploni. But what exactly was the status of these Arab camel drivers? I have pointed out that the expression someone from the corps of royal camel drivers commanded by someone is borrowed from the military language. In addition, Barkaios, a Cyrenian, is attested as the head of the royal camel drivers in several texts, including this one, the first one I show you. It's an order for supplying a traveler on the road. However, Cyrenians were hired as soldiers by the Ptolemaic power. So if the chief of the royal camel drivers is a soldier, like the Cyrenian Barkaios, it's maybe a clue to say that the camel drivers were also part of the army in some ways. And the name here of the traveler is also interesting because the name is Ondoaris, or maybe Ondodris, because the reading is not sure too. You see here Ondo, and here we have Ris, and the letter here is uncertain. So Ondoaris or Ondodris. I don't know this name, so but I don't think it's an Arabic name. I suppose it could be troglodyte, because Ondoaris here is a guide for the camel drivers, and the troglodyte in this part of the desert were also known as guides. So maybe a troglodyte. The Arabs enlisted as camel drivers at Bir Samut may therefore have been integrated into the army. Indeed, individuals bearing the ethnic Arab in the Ptolemaic documentation often held military or paramilitary functions. In these texts, the ethnic and the occupation name intermingle. The ethnic Arabs designates a professional category, more precisely a military position, because the Arabs were commonly employed as policemen and guards in Ptolemaic Egypt. So yeah, there is an overlap between the ethnic and the name of the occupation. It should be noted, however, that Arab warriors who were known to fight with bows on camelback are not recorded in the Ptolemaic army by the ancient historians. If soldiers were involved in the system of the caravans, this would also explain why some camel drivers had Greek or Egyptian names, as shown in the list we have seen, if you remember. It would also explain why in some texts the Greek Radanos is referred to as the Arabs, despite his rare Greek name. Radanos actually appears in the Hermophilos letter on the back of the Ostracan. I didn't show you this part. So he is definitely involved in relations with the Arab camel drivers. But as you can see here at the bottom of the slide, Radanos, so beautiful Greek name, is called Arabs. The Greek term Arabs would, in this case, be a pseudo-ethnic employed because of the predominance of Arabs among the corps of the camel drivers. The use of this pseudo-ethnic could be the reason for the use of the expression Arab of the desert, to refer to Emrus in Hermophilos' letter. The aim of this expression was probably to distinguish the real nomadic Arabs, the so-called Arabs from the desert, like Omrus, from the soldiers of a different origin, Egyptian and Greek, who had borrowed this ethnic by working with the camel drivers at Bir Samut, who were mainly Arabs. Before moving on to the Arabs in the Ostraca from Ghozza, I would like to point out the mention in the Greek text of Bir Samut of a toponym that seems to be Arab. This toponym is Sapar, a place name that appears in several texts to designate one of the small stations supplied by Bir Samut. According to Ahmed Al-Jalad, it may derive its name from the root Safar, which refers to travel. It's a very appropriate name for a place on a caravan trail. Several ostraca of Bir Samut concern requests to send water to Sapar. This one, the one you can see on the screen, is particularly urgent because the author writes, you'd better start transporting the water immediately, start with Sapar or by Zeus, matondia in Greek, it's an exclamation, at least send me a load. So this is probably a site with no well, which depended on the well which was at Bir Samut. According to Bérengère Redon, who worked on the system of the road between Edfou and Berenike, this site would correspond to the small station Rod El Loga near Bir Samut. It's at the east of Bir Samut, a few kilometers away. Now that we have seen that the Arabs who lived and worked at Bir Samut were responsible for camel breeding and running the caravans of the supply system, let's look at Ghozza. Arabic anthroponymy is also well represented, as at Bir Samut. But the role of the Arabs is much less clear at Ghozza. In the ostraca from this site, they appear mainly in lists of names, among other anthroponyms, Greek and Egyptian, like in the list of camel drivers from Bir Samut. These lists are not very detailed and tell us nothing about their activities around the gold mines exploited by the inhabitants of Ghozza for the Greek rulers. One of the Arabic names is Miamer, son of Abdaios. The name Miamer is not otherwise attested in Greek documentation. My colleague Anna Lagaron suggested that this name be identified with Muammar, attested in a funerary tombstone from Cairo. This seems to be a perfectly plausible suggestion. So here we have Miamer, probably an Arabic name, and the patronym Abdaios, which is also it proves that Miamer is in fact an Arabic name. In another list, with other male and female names, we read the name Assados, corresponding to the Arabic name Assad, according to Kaplony. Another list includes the name Assassos, a transcription of the Arabic Ashash, according to Jean-Baptiste Yon. And he studied this name because it is found in inscriptions, in several inscriptions from Palmyra. Finally, I was able to identify the name Iamblikos, the name of the Syrian philosopher, which comes from the Palmyrean Yamliku. It is interesting to note that this anthroponym can be related to a camel driver's name attested at Bir Samut, Iomelis. And the name Iomelis, so one of the camel drivers from Bir Samut, comes from the same root than Iamblikos. Iomelis is in fact an hypochoristic of Yamliku. Iamblikos is a rare name in papyri because the 5 attestations all date from the Roman period and probably refer to the same man in Elephantine. Despite the lack of information in the Ostraca from Ghozza, there are some similarities with the texts from Bir Samut. The site has yielded a very fragmentary text that mentions Germos, an Arab with the ethnic. Germos, Arabs, and here we have Germos receives money, and which is perhaps his salary. In the Ostraca from Bir Samut too, the Arabs received money, so they were paid by the Greek authorities to breed camels and organize the system of the caravans. Here at Ghozza, Germos receives also money. This name, Germos, is attested at Bir Samut, where it also appears with the ethnic. It's the text on the right. In Greek, the transcription Garmos, with alpha, is attested in the Negev and in the Oran in Syria, but not the vocalization with epsilon. We have Garmos and not Germos. But we could probably recognize the root gerem in this name. Finally, we also read the name Sametos at Ghozza, a Semitic name already attested in an inscription from the Eastern Desert. It's the inscription Koptos à Kosser 149, which is a dedication to the god Pan, who protected travelers on their journey through the desert, as shown by his epithet. It's the epithet Eodos, Pan of the good road, literally. So this name is attested in this inscription from the Eastern Desert and in numerous inscriptions from Arabia and Syria. This mention is interesting because Sametos appears in a text mentioning charcoal and a forge, probably the place where the miner's tools were reforged. The charcoal was used to run the forge. And here the text precises the outdoor forge because it's probably the forge, one of the forges which were outside the village. 22.5 artabas of grain, it's the equivalent of around 545 kilos of barley or 680 kilos of wheat, so it's a very, very big quantity of grain, are associated with the name Sametos. It is possible that he was in charge of transporting grain for the mine workers and therefore had a role similar to that of the camel drivers at Bir Samut. In fact, in Bir Samut, the camel drivers transport also very big quantities of grain according to the numerous accounts discovered on the site. So if you remember well, the second list of camel drivers we saw previously had a total of 26 artabas of barley. So it's a number very close, a figure very close to the amount in this short text. The texts from Ghozza are strangely silent about the supply of the site. We have no accounts of food distribution as we have at Bir Samut. The site, which benefited from a very large well, as you saw on the photo, was self-sufficient in terms of water resources, but had to be supplied with grain. We are in the middle of the desert. But one letter mentions a fish sent to a resident of Ghozza by a woman perhaps his wife, who had stayed in the valley or in a port on the Red Sea. This woman writes that she had to pay transport costs for the fish. Transport costs, in Greek, it's nolon. So there were indeed caravans coming to supply the site. They needed a caravan to transport the fish and the grain to the village. But the Arabs mentioned in the text were perhaps involved in this system. But it is also possible that some of them were hired to work in the gold mines, but for now we don't have any proof of this in the text. So I prefer the hypothesis of the link with the caravans, even if at Ghozza we don't have the accounts for now. Like in the Ostraca from Bir Samut, with the toponym Sapar, the text from Ghozza also include an Arabic toponym. Indeed, two texts mention a place named Rima, for example, in this list of names. So as you can see, we have several anthroponyms, and at the end, on the right, you can read Raiman. So we should probably understand Ace Raiman, as in the other text with this toponym. And under Raiman, we have the total of the number of the names. It's 9 theta. So this place, Raima, also appears in Roman times in several ostraca from the Mons Claudianus. Hélène Cuvigny has identified this toponym with the site of Abu Zawal, another Ptolemaic gold mining site. And in the Roman period, at the time of the activity of the Mons Claudianus, Raima will be a praesidium, that is to say, a station on the road to the Mons Claudianus for the quarries. But at the time of Ghozza, Raima is another site for gold mining. And this text is also very interesting because it shows the link between the sites, the mines in the Eastern Desert. There we know, thanks to the documentation, that they had context between them. Christian Robin suggests that this name, Raima, has an Arabic or Aramaic origin and is probably built on the root Rim. So we might then think of linking it to the name Raim, which means hill or tomb. To conclude, we have seen differences in the role of the Arabs depending on the activity of the site. Caravan activity was less developed at Ghozza, a mining village, than at Bir Samut, a road station. It is therefore normal that the Arabs, as camel drivers, were more active at Bir Samut. We have also seen that in the texts of the Eastern Desert, the ethnic Arab can be a real ethnic, as indicated by onomastics. But also, as in the valley, this ethnic Arabs can be an occupation name referring to a military activity, and more precisely, that of the camel drivers apparently integrated in some way into the army. In that case, the ethnic can be used by Greeks and Egyptians. In both cases, Bir Samut and Ghozza, the texts show that the Arabs were involved by the Greeks in the logistics of the exploitation of the Eastern Desert. The relationship with them seems to have been less tense than with the troglodytes, a nomadic African people. Some of the texts from Bir Samut testify indeed to violence between the troglodytes and the other occupants of the desert. For example, a letter in which the Egyptian Panas reports that he was beaten by a group of troglodytes who wanted food. But this is never the case with the Arabs. It's also interesting to note that to this day, no troglodyte appears in the Ostraca from Ghozza. This site, much further north in the Eastern Desert than Bir Samut, must have been outside their territory. While Arabs and troglodytes must have lived side by side at Bir Samut, the Arabs seem to have been the only representatives of the desert dwellers at Ghozza. The question of nomadic people's territories is always a difficult one, but this observation provides a further clue to the Arab settlement in the desert. The participation of the Arabs in the exploitation of the desert by the Ptolemies was important. Supplying the road sites was necessary for the successful running of the elephant hunts. Hence, the need to increase the herds due to the high level of activity that is represented, as it is shown in the letter from Hermophilos. In this letter, we can indeed feel a certain pressure on the camel breeders, who are threatened with paying a penalty if they do not supply the camels. In Ghozza, the exploitation of gold mines was also important to the Greek kings, who deployed human resources involving Arabs in order to benefit from this income. However, we do not know whether the Arabs lived in the station of Bir Samut or in the village of Ghozza, or whether they lived in tents close to these sites, thus maintaining their nomadic lifestyles. And we found some what the ceremologists call Eastern desert ware. It's ceramics linked with the troglodytes, but they didn't identify any ceramics linked with the Arabs. Finally, the anthroponyms in the Ostraca from Bir Samut and Ghozza add to our knowledge of Arabic onomastics and, more broadly, of the history of these people who were already present and active in Egypt in the early Ptolemaic period. In the future, half of the village of Ghozza has yet to be excavated, so we hope to find further clues to the role of the Arabs in gold mining. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Laura, for this very interesting and informative talk. I think many of you have questions as myself. Would you please allow me to start with my questions, and I will later open the floor for the public to ask any question you have in mind. So I have always been wondering about the introduction of the camels to the Egyptian milieu. And I think Pierre can also join the discussion, because as far as I know, the camels are not depicted or represented in the ancient Egyptians, but they were introduced to Egypt, as you said, since the first millennium onwards. Do we have any information about the oldest depiction or attestation for camels in Ptolemaic texts?
No, I don't think so. I think that the Ostraca from Ghozza are the first clue to the introduction of camels in Egypt, but camels as a pack animal, not a domestic animal.
Yeah.
So the camels of Bir Samut are the first one.
So they were only used for the long distance transportation,
yes,
not in the short distance within the Nile Valley.
Yeah.
Okay.
Between on the road between Berenike and Edfu.
Okay,
yeah.
Very interesting. My second question about the double identities, which is very interesting. I think we have the same thing in the Arabic papyri. We have Copts with Arab names, and I think it's a very interesting point that you should a little bit elaborate for our students. Why do we have Arabs with the Greek names or Egyptian names? What were the main reasons for them? Because in the Arabic papyri, the main reason is conversion. So they converted from Christianity to Islam, and then they carried an Arabic name. But I think this is not the same with your case.
So yes, I know it's a little bit strange to have Arabs with those kinds of names, but we think that Arabs, there is a migration from Arabia very earlier than the Ptolemaic period in Egypt. So in the Ptolemaic period, Arabs are in Egypt since a little bit of time already. And some of them are still in the desert as nomads, but some of them are also sedentary in the valley. And we even have some toponyms in the valley containing the term Arab. In the Fayoum, for example, we have Kome Arabon, if I remember well. It's the village of the Arabs. So they, yes, they settle in the valley. And since they are settled in the valley and they are in Egypt since a while, they took Egyptian or Greek names. It's not rare names. Most of the time it's very common, like Ptolemaios, Apollonios, Demetrios. So very common Greek names, because they are here since a while, and probably also for the administration it was easier if they bear a Greek or Egyptian name, because the pronunciation...
Familiarity, so to be close to the community, I think that's a very logic. My last question about the toponym Safar. I don't really agree with Ahmed, because did you read this in one of Ahmed's works, or you contacted him in person?
Yeah, it's a personal communication.
Okay, because Safar is just traveling, so it does not refer to a toponym. But yeah, I don't really know. But Ahmed al-Jallad is one of the big fishes in the field of epigraphy, Arabic epigraphy. So these are my questions. If you have any question, please.
You say that it's linked with travel?
Yeah, not a toponym.
Not
to refer to a specific name. Just traveling or...
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it couldn't be a toponym?
Yeah, I suppose.
Okay.
So, Dr. Hind, would you kindly introduce yourself and ask your question?
Okay. Firstly, I would like to thank you, Laura, for your great effort in this work. I would like to ask about something. Have you touched any statements or expressions on the Ostraca that can give us indication for the attitude or feelings between the Ptolemies and the Arabs who were employed by them? Have you found something like this? And my second question concerning what hypothesis that you put in your mind in the beginning and you found it as fact when you go through your hard work? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So it's very difficult to know the feeling according to the Ostraca, because the documentation of the Eastern Desert, it's an administrative one. So we don't have a lot of, personal letters and things like that. So it's very difficult to really know the relationship between Greek, Egyptians, and the Arabs on the field. We had this letter about the attack from the troglodytes, so we know it was not easy. But for the Arabs, no, we don't know. But in the rest of the documentation of the papyri, I think that we can see, particularly in the letter to Zenon, with the Arab complaining about a mistreatment because he is a barbaros and he can't speak Greek. So through those kind of documents, we can see that, there was a difference for some of them, at least, with the attitude of the Greek towards them. But in the Ostraca from the Eastern Desert, not really. But we know that they receive money, they receive grain too, so they were totally completely involved in the system as colleagues. So they were part of the system, they were important for them, so I think they were well treated in some way. And your second question was?
About your hypothesis in the beginning, and you found it as facts when you were through this journey.
I don't think I started with a hypothesis. We just found the text and then, okay, we will see what we will read. Yes, it was a surprise. It wasn't totally a surprise to find Arabs in this part of Egypt, of course, and we already have Arabs in the valley. So, but yeah, we were very happy to find Arabs and troglodytes because it's the history of those peoples is not well known. So yeah, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, I think it will be very nice if we find any text for the Arabs referring to themselves. I think that would be very interesting because usually the Arabs like to identify themselves in more generations. So his first name, his patronymic, his grandfather's name, and his no tribal affiliation appears in not at all.
No tribes, no. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sadly.
One more question for it?
Thank you, Laura, for your lectures. I think for the text, the Greek one, which we already have, barbaros. You know that the Greek people said the barbaros for anyone except the Greeks. So why you think it's this person is Arab,
Yeah,
not from any nationality?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's the context because he was a camel driver. He went to Syria, and I didn't tell everything about this text, but we know that he stayed in Syria because of the mistreatment by the Greeks. So yeah, we can be almost sure that he was an Arab, because it would be strange if he was an Egyptian, for example, because it's the camel driver in Syria. And but you're totally right. The word barbaros is not enough to say that he was an Arab, because barbaros, as you said, it could be even an Egyptian, in fact. So yeah.
Hind, you have a follow-up question?
This question for you, Dr. Khaled. Have you found Arabs so proud of their Greek or non-Arab original or of their ancestors' names? They didn't mention that. Thank you.
As I said, even the Copts carrying Arabic names, they would like to refer to their new Arab names, not the Coptic names. So no. So people usually have this double identity with their original names, and then when they converted to Islam, they would adopt an Arabic name. So for some reasons, mainly legal, so they should keep both identities for legal identification. But they would refer to themselves in the community with their Arab names, new Arab names, not the Coptic, because they would desert their past and starting a new life with a new name and a new religion, new culture, new language. Wafa.
First, I thank you for your work, and it is good work. When we study Arabic papyri, we explain and analyze everything in the text from what is the content of the text, which refers to the social or political things in the country. When you find the Ostraca or the papyri, you find any text which refers to or analyzes the text to refer the political, social relationship between Arabs and Ptolemaic.
No, sadly not. No, we don't have any more information about this point. No, on this point, sadly.
More questions from this side? Anna?
The right side.
I'm just asking myself about the final os. Okay, sometimes we have this final os and sometimes not, like Miamer and Abdos or Baidos. Do you have any information of this use? Was it pronounced or not? Maybe the real name was Omar and they wrote Amros, because it was common to write this like that. Do you have any information about that?
In fact, it's really difficult in the accounts because it's not well written. The case in the account is not always the same. So even in Greek, we have mistakes. So for Arabic names, it's worse. So I think that for some of them, they thought about the ending, os, to decline the name. But sometimes, even in Greek, we should have, I don't know, a nominative and we have an accusative. In the accounts, in the same accounts, you can have all the cases, all the possible cases, because it's the scribe who made some mistakes. And it's interesting too, because the name, the toponym Sapar, for example, in one of my texts from Bir Samut, it's written Saparo. So they tried to decline the name and it failed. But yes, we read Saparo, there is no hesitation. So yes, sometimes they tried and sometimes not. Yeah.
Okay. And about the name Abdos, so you say that maybe it's not an Arab root?
Yeah, I read it's a Semitic name, but Semitic, so not necessarily Arab.
Because that's strange. We find an Abdos in an Islamic stela from the 8th, 9th century, and we were just asking, okay, what this is Abdos, because it's not common. It looks like contraction of name or something, but we do not have roots for this name, so it's really interesting to see. Maybe we can have a Greek a Greek repertory coming in the Arabic also, and so it was really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have more questions, or Lamia? No? Zainab? Not at all. So if we don't really have any questions, we would like again to thank Laura for this very interesting lecture. We were very glad to have you in the Arabic Papyrology seminar, and we look forward to another lecture, maybe in the not near future, but in the far future. Yeah. Okay? I know. Okay, thank you very much indeed.